Hello, it's Friday afternoon here in Sydney, Australia, and so it's time for Friday Beers with Marc and Stuart. I'm Stuart Roberts.
Hang on. Was with the Trump Cup.
Okay, Marc. You introduce yourself and then I'll explain why I'm wearing this.
I'm Marc, but what's up with the Trump Cup?
Okay. So, Marc, you know I'm fairly conservative when it comes to my economic and social views.
I didn't know it was this bad. But
Okay. I've been thinking a bit about how the 45th president has been good for the life sciences sector.
Right.
And so one of the themes I want to run with for Friday Beers today is how we're going to make biotech great again.
Right. That's a good one.
Right. Okay.
I'll give him one thing, though.
Right.
Unlike 99.99% of all politicians,
Right.
he actually does what he said he was going to do,
Right.
which
to
is
shock horror. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, from a life sciences perspective, it's probably the best thing that happened to the sector since Orphan Drug Act back in, what was it, the 70s?
In 1983. I think this has
right.
been a big step forward. Now, let me explain my reasoning here. President Trump's big thing that's had everyone scared is drug prices. He wants drug prices to come down. And those of us who know the biotech industry will agree with that. There's a lot of mainstream drugs that cost too much. Where you want high pricing is in the orphan drugs, where there's no drugs available.
So what's an orphan drug? Just for our viewers.
Sure. So in the US, it's a drug where there's less than 200,000 patients. So traditionally, those markets were too small for the pharma companies to care about. In comes the Orphan Drug Act 35 years ago now. And there begins a flurry of development of new orphan drugs. Now that's now on steroids thanks to the kind of high pricing that you can get.
So what does that mean for Aussie life sciences companies?
So basically, if any biotech company or medical device company is working in an orphan sector, they're likely to get half decent pricing for their drug. You would have seen that in our recent report on Neuron Pharmaceuticals. We talked about the high pricing they could get for trofinetide, for example. Now. The other thing President Trump's been good for is he signed the Right to Try Act. So now patients who've exhausted all alternatives where there's an experimental agent can now get access to the drug, obviously without abrogating the usual ethical evaluation that goes on at the institutional review board level. Okay. But it's now a whole lot easier to run a clinical trial thanks to the passage of that drug under President Trump.
There's a few good things coming out of all this.
Right. So not everything that President Trump is bad. All your liberals out there pay attention. Yeah. All right, enough of that distraction.
All right, excellent. One other thing that caught my eye is actually, where is it? It's somewhere in the paper.
Right.
Yeah, it's just all to do with the dividend imputation.
Okay.
And so companies are paying out extra dividends now, scared that Labor will cut off this route in a couple of months if they get elected.
Okay. So miracles have been known to happen. So the Morrison government may return in May. But if it ends up being bill shortened and the rest of the policy that they've got, obviously they're going to do away with the excess credits associated with dividend imputation.
Right.
Doesn't change the system. They're not game enough to do that. But as you can appreciate, the big losers out of this are small investors whose incomes aren't high, and therefore they won't get the excess credits they weren't expecting before. I actually think this is going to be bad for small and mid caps. In particular, because
why's that?
Well, because in many cases it's individual investors that are the mainstay of these kind of companies. Mm-hmm. If suddenly they're not investing in those companies because they're cutting back on their share portfolio, that could be a worry. Yeah. So something to be concerned about.
Yeah. All right. Guess what happened to me the other day, by the way?
Well, I was a bit concerned after last Friday's.
Yeah. So I was walking down Pitt Street.
Okay.
Get smacked in the head with a handbag by some lady. About last week's episode.
Okay.
Well, we talked about the Chief Equality Officer.
Okay.
And so that was a big surprise.
All right. So we need to get the message out there. What are we doing to promote equality within Pitt Street Research?
Well, look, about 50% of our staff are basically immigrants.
Right.
I.e. me.
Right. I'm the token Australian in this firm. Okay. And who else we got?
Well, actually, it's more than 50% because I'm 6'9".
Okay.
You're only 6'3". So there's more of me than there is of you.
Okay. Right. So should we talk to the Foreign Investment Review Board about this?
Maybe one day see this. They'll come knocking. But also, our first intern is from India.
Right.
And the next intern is starting in a couple of weeks. She's from, it's a she, first of all, and also from overseas. So I think we're quite a diverse bunch here at Pitt Street, and definitely an equal opportunity employer.
Okay, and think about this, how globalized the research business has become. Like when you and I were starting out in this business, it was, well, in your case, Dutch investors focused on Dutch investors and analysts focused on Dutch equities. It's not like that anymore. The world's such a globalized place.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that inclules the production of the sort of research that we do at Pitt Street Research.
And one point to make also with the two interns that we're getting on board, they're not hired, based on gender or color or whatever, or sexual preference.
Yep.
but purely based on
sheer ability, right?
Exactly. So the skills and that sort of stuff. So we just wanted to make that point. The handbag, that still hurts, but we'll get over it.
Okay, now, other piece of news is there's a report out from Capital Economics, which I think is a London-based company. They're predicting a 15% drop in the Australian dollar this year. What's their thinking?
Well, basically because of the change in...
Your health, sir.
Cheers. So I noticed this... We'll talk about this a bit later, but
right.
Seems to be a Greek guy.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Mediterranean lager. We'll talk about it in a moment.
Yeah. About the Aussie dollar expected to decline versus the US.
Right.
Dollar by 15%, and it's all about change in thinking about the interest rates movement by the RBA.
So not so much concerns on commodity prices or China slowdown.
Well, a little bit, but part of the thinking is instead of a rate hike this year, they're now expecting a lowering of the interest rate, which will partly trigger this. But the other aspect is potential risk coming out of China.
Right. Housing prices we talked about last week, that's got to have an impact somewhere on the currency if it starts to get ahead of steam this year.
If it starts to affect the banks, etc.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we need to be thinking about stocks with a fair degree of overseas income and a relatively low level of hedging in this sort of environment, so they can take advantage of that.
Tourism stocks.
Okay.
So Australia will become cheaper if this happens.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the interest rate movement.
Okay.
But we'll see how that plays out. Okay. But if that is if it happens, if it's a lower rate by this time next year, then instead of an interest rate increase by the RBA, then that's sort of the thematic you can see. Right.
And it's fair to say in an environment where rates are permanently low, there's no reason why Aussie equities can't have another good year. It's not like we talked about last week about the potential for quantitative easing.
Yeah.
Markets only ever really take a big dump if interest rates are at something like a 7-year high.
Right.
I can't remember the last time we had a 7-year high on interest rates were, but it's got to be back in about 2007 possibly.
Right. So what's this we're drinking? The Greek guy at the front. So this seems to be a beer with a debt problem, but talk us through this.
Yeah, it's an unusual thing. So this is sea base Mediterranean lager. I've come actually closer to where we are with this one. The Yuli's brewery is right next door to the restaurant of the same name in Alexandria in inner city Sydney. So vegetarian restaurant for those of you who are into that sort of thing.
No.
Okay, but the beer's not bad.
It's pretty good, yeah.
So the brewery's across the road from the restaurant. And what they want is stuff that could go with some of the Mediterranean type vegetarian stuff they were using.
Yeah, it's nice and light.
Low alcohol beer, lager, only about 4.2%. Reasonably pale in colour, so the EBC's only about 9.2. You could argue it's a New Zealand beer. They've spiced it up with Motueka. Now, makers of lagers often use Motueka from South Island in New Zealand, if they want a spicy citrus kind of flavour, and you can probably taste those notes there.
So it's real good.
When I bought this at the shop, the lady at the counter was enthusiastic. That's our biggest seller at the moment.
Oh,
so this could be a brewery you're hearing a lot more of in Sydney.
So this is sea bass Mediterranean.
Mediterranean from Yuli's Brewery, Alexandria in inner city Sydney.
Right. On that note, we'll sign off.
Well, that's all I have time for. Thank you for listening. Good luck, investors, and good luck to the Australian dollar, which is about to go down 15%.
Yeah, that's right. See you next week.
See you. Cheers.